I make it 12:30. Thank you for joining us, everybody. I think we'll get underway. Welcome to the latest in Agencia's series of webinars supporting, hoping to support leaders and organisations in what are challenging times. The latest webinar addresses serious fraud and the second threat from COVID-19. It's been delivered by Agencia experts Tim Hull, who is our Director of Serious Crime, and Richard Wood, Director of Justice, Policing and Security. To confirm, we will be sharing the webinar on the Agencia website, and we'll be sharing a link on social media, so do keep an eye out for that. We'll also be sharing the slides with everybody who's registered. And finally, there is a Q&A facility, if I can draw your attention to that in the Zoom application. The intention is to address any questions that you may have towards the end of the webinar, so do feel free to make any notes in the Q&A section, and we'll collate those and look to address those as soon as at the conclusion of the main presentation. So I'll hand over now to Tim and Richard to get underway. Thanks, gents.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the latest webinar on serious fraud. Just by a very quick way of introduction, my name is Tim Holt. I'm the Director of Serious Crime at Agencia. Very brief background. I was a police officer with Avon and Somerset from 1980. I joined the Financial Investigation Unit in 1996, and then went on to do financial investigation training and regulation throughout the UK and abroad until 2018. When I was fortunate enough to join Agencia as the Director of Serious Crime. Currently, amongst other things, I'm working on a project around fraud and corruption across Eastern Europe, particularly in and around Bosnia and Herzegovina. My colleague this morning who's going to help me out is Richard Wood. Over to you, Rick.
Thanks very much, Tim. And I've got a very minor role this morning. I'll just be asking Tim a series of questions to steer the webinar through its course. But by way of background, like Tim, I'm a former police officer, a detective. I was a senior investigating officer managing a team that investigated child murders. I also worked for a short while, a few years, with the counter-terrorism team in the Home Office. I've got 20 years experience working in crisis and war-torn countries with the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the UK's Foreign Office, and most recently as a diplomat with the EU's Foreign Service working in the Balkans. And I'm now a Director at Agencia for Justice, Policing and Security. So back over to you, Tim, for an introduction to this interesting subject.
Okay, thanks, Rick. There's a lot of current publicity about frauds at the moment. I've heard quite a bit today. Basically, COVID-19 doesn't discriminate between the race, sexes, colour or creed. And I'm sure that many of us today in the audience have been touched in one way or another by this pandemic. It's presented new and unforeseen challenges to our government, to other governments, and all of the supporting services on the front line who are doing their utmost to mitigate the risks to all of us. Unfortunately, along with this is something which is not a new phenomenon, and that's financial crime. It's aimed at individuals, businesses, institutions, and indeed governments. They're perpetrated in the main by callous and unscrupulous gangs who care nothing for suffering experienced by millions of people worldwide, but seek to make money wherever and whenever the opportunity arises. Popular, these types of crimes are called scams, but I don't believe that really does justice to them and the impact that they have on each and every one of us. Their crimes are personal and very serious. To date, since the start of the coronavirus, 509 crimes have been connected to COVID-19 that have been reported to the police, resulting in losses of more than £1.6 million, and that was publicised this morning. The current climate produces relatively easy pickings for these gangs and individuals because the main focus of us is concentrated on the virus and how to deal with it, and therefore in other situations we may well take our eye off the ball, which makes many of us and our businesses, both individually and collectively, very vulnerable. This webinar is designed to try and make people more aware of potential ways, A, in which we may be exploited, and B, what we can do about it. It's not designed for fraud professionals and professional investigators, because we can't hope to go into any great depth about the frauds and how they're perpetrated in the time that we've got. A lot of what I'm going to draw your attention to will be common sense, but there will be some elements which I'm sure will be familiar to you. But please stick with it, and it may be that there's some things that you empathise with and that you've got experience of, and hopefully this will help you get through that experience. Back to you, Rick.
All right, Tim, thanks for the intro. It would be really useful, and I think we'd all be very grateful if you could explain in layman's language the different types of crime and how they're actually carried out. Okay.
First of all, I couldn't possibly go through every single type of fraud because there are literally hundreds of them. The Action Fraud website, which is the main reporting centre for fraud within the United Kingdom, itself has over 50 listed different types of fraud, which are all defined on it and which are regularly practiced by financial gangs, by criminal gangs rather. Since this pandemic has started, there's been a well-publicised rise in the cases and types of fraud that are being carried out. And I want to draw your attention to just a few of the more popular ones at the moment. There's a fraud called phishing, which I'm sure most of you will be aware of, which involves the malicious or sending of malicious attachments or website links in an effort to infect computers or mobile devices. Emails, letters, instant messages, or even text messages are sent to unsuspecting companies or individuals. Embedded links within the message then can direct you to hoax websites where your login or personal details may be requested and exploited. You may run the risk of your computer, smartphone, tablet, whatever, to being infected by viruses which are generated through this method. To date, since the start of COVID-19, the National Crime Agency are aware of over 3,500 cases since this started. Once your personal details have been accessed, criminals can then record this information and may use it to commit other types of fraud. I just want to draw your attention to this slide, which doesn't appear to be working. That's a good start. The slide seems to be stuck. There we go. This particular one is a real fraud and purports to come from Netflix. And you'll see the red box in there which says update account now. Click on that and the viruses in it run right on your computer and literally take all your personal data. There are a couple of other examples that I want to give you. One where text messages that were purported to have emanated from the UK government offering advice regarding the pandemic, they've included links to bogus sites, which also then hook into your private data. So beware of those. Any messages from the government, go onto the government website. There is a particular entry there which gives you all the information that you need. Action Fraud and the NCA were also made aware of a number of emails circulated purporting to be from the government asking for the donations to the NHS. These are fake. Any funds submitted via the link given on that email or that text message will have ended up in the hands of criminals. If you do wish to donate to the NHS, which is obviously a very worthwhile cause, get onto your local NH Trust or go via the official NHS channels. This one here, this particular text here, reads someone who came into contact with you, tested positive or has shown symptoms for COVID-19, and then gives you a link there. This is a malicious text message that was sent. If you clicked onto that particular link, again, that takes you to another bogus site, and a virus will come down the line and infect your computer. So please be aware of that. The point of these is that criminals are looking to commit identity theft, where they take all your personal details. And from that, they can access your bank accounts, access your personal agreements, such as mobile phone contracts, etc., which severely damages your credit rating and can affect your credit standing. It also can cause you all sorts of untold misery in terms of bills and invoices that you haven't actually perpetrated yourselves. So please be aware of that. A bit later on, we'll come to what to do about things like this. at the moment, I just want to make aware of what types of fraud are being perpetrated at the moment. One of the more unusual frauds that I wasn't too familiar with was what they call work from home fraud. Because many of us are working from home at the moment and more internet activity, there is an exploitation of this, and more fraudulent sites who are advertising businesses, starting your own businesses where you work from home, are being put onto the internet. Things to look out for are where they try to make you pay a fee up front. They then avoid paying you for any work that you've done. They make you buy worthless products or make you sign others up to the scheme. Please be aware of these. They seem to be very attractive, but basically, if it looks too good to be true, and they come out of nothing and completely out of the blue, please be very wary of them, and certainly don't pay any money in advance. A legitimate employer won't ask you to pay any money in advance for anything. There's also been an increase in what we call normal everyday internet frauds, such as the spread of malware and viruses. I've already touched on that once. There are many, many different types of virus, and again, I don't intend to go through all of them. We all know, and it's common sense to know, that viruses will infect your laptop, your desktop computers, your mobile phones, or whatever. And they are designed to extract your personal information. Some of this is called ransomware, and this is designed to get you as the victim to pay a fee before you're allowed back into your device. And an example of this happened very close to home last week, when a friend of mine who's 70, lives on her own, and she received an email asking her to pay a fee in Bitcoins. Well, Sue unfortunately didn't even know what Bitcoins were, and it alleged that she had been on a number of pornographic sites, including child pornography. Of course she hadn't been, and if she had logged into that, the link that was given on that particular email, they'd have infected her computer. Also, she would have had to have paid money in relation to that. Thankfully, she gave me a call, and also her son, and we were able to get her to come out of that, and it was reported to the relevant authorities. But if emails like that come out of the blue, please be aware of them. Other types of virus are called spyware or keylogging, and what you may not even be aware that they're actually in your computer. And what these can do is they track your browsing history, which can show what sites you've been on, what types of shopping you do, also about your bank accounts. A key logging can detect the exact letters or numbers you type in to your device's keyboard, so they can copy complete documents. There are loads of them. What I have got here, hopefully it'll work, here we are, is from Europol. This was recently published. It's a checklist to make sure that you keep up to date with the antivirus on your computers, and make sure that you're aware of what may or may not happen to your computers. Other types of fraud involve medical scams, where health and medical scams happen after an email or an advert promising, in the main, miracle tablets and medical supplies. Victims believe that they'll receive a product for the service of good quality at a lower price, or that the product or service they're buying will provide a miracle cure. First of all, it's got to be worth noting that, as we know at the moment, there has been no publicised cure for COVID-19, despite the fact that many governments across the world are working flat out on it. And the United Nations Office for Drugs and Crime publicly warned that fake medicines are now routinely being advertised. Another type of medical fraud involved fake online pharmacies which offer drugs and medicines. And again, I've got an example of that in a minute. Supply scams. There are a number of instances where businesses and governments are seeking to purchase equipment such as PPE. And this has been very well publicised at the moment with the shortages for our frontline staff. Adverts offering the supply of goods very often come from abroad, for example, Asia and China, and promote anything from protective gowns to face masks and hand gel. Only a couple of weeks ago, a 39-year-old man was arrested in Singapore for his involvement in money laundering offences linked to this type of fraud. excuse me, where he usurped the identity of a legitimate company and offered the sale of masks and hand sanitizers. A French company reported to Europol that they'd been defrauded of 6.6 million euros in relation to this. And thankfully, due to urgent action of all parties, the man was arrested in Singapore. One of the more stark frauds has been operated against hospitals. And Interpol and our National Cyber Reporting Centre are advertising that cyber criminals are exploiting the virus, threatening to hold hospitals to ransom. Basically, what they'll do is they'll get into the IT systems by whatever means that they particularly choose, and then they will hold that particular hospital to ransom and not let anybody back into the IT systems before they are paid. And a real life example of this happened in the Czech Republic in March, where cyber criminals carried out an attack on the hospital IT infrastructure. The attack caused the hospital to shut down for several days. It had to shut down its entire IT network and also those of the nearby children's and maternity hospitals, who were also part of their network. Of course, you can imagine that this caused the disruption of ordinary and urgent surgeries and was a real danger to life. This could be the case at the moment. Thankfully, at the moment, there aren't too many that have been publicised, and let's hope it stays that way. And finally, for what I've got at the moment, charity frauds are very prevalent. Charities are struggling at the moment, and what the criminals have recognised this and are operating in these types of fraud. Basically, they'll masquerade as charities, calling businesses, selling advertising space in a bogus publication on behalf of a seemingly good cause. They then get the business to part with funds on the premise that their business will be publicised, which of course it won't be. Again, it's something that you must be aware of, especially if you're a director or financial director in charge of a company. Back to you, Rick.
Well, again, thank you, Tim, for that very detailed overview. But from what you're saying, these despicable crime types are global. But where, in your view, do the criminals target specifically?
Unfortunately, it's a good question, actually, that. Unfortunately, around the world at the moment, criminals are very good and very adaptable. Most jurisdictions at the moment are experiencing some type of restriction in the movement of their citizens, and consequently businesses are suffering. More and more people are working from home or spending more time at home and able to work more time on the internet, and there are legitimate concerns over finances and what will happen for them and their families. And these ruthless gangs are aware of this and will exploit that situation to set up many of the schemes that we've already discussed. So the answer to where is literally anywhere, unfortunately. At home, via the post, via smartphones, computers, obviously via the internet and emails, as we discovered, and even by telephone calls. All of these mediums are patrolled and exploited by the criminals. However, the crimes are international. There's a fraud I was made aware of, which happened in March, which was an Interpol investigation, where a German company contracted two sales companies in Zurich and Hamburg, where they wanted to find 15 million euros worth of face masks. The buyers, as we know at the moment, are in demand, and there's a global shortage of medical supplies. So the German company followed new leads and placed an order with what appeared to be a legitimate Spanish company to supply the goods. However, the site was fake. Their legitimate email addresses had been compromised, and in email exchanges, the Spanish company initially claimed to have 10 million masks, but the delivery fell through. Again, the excuse of shortage of material was put forward. Eventually, the German buyers agreed to buy 1.5 million masks from a third company in the Netherlands, which was again a fake company, and they parted with 1.5 million euros. Again, the supplies didn't materialise. So it's happened to companies that are very close to international governments. And again, it's not just individuals, but they're targeting very, very secure businesses and companies close to national governments. Back to you, Rick.
So, targeting everybody in essence, but what on earth drives these anonymous criminals? Why do they commit these contemptible crimes, Tim?
Well, in a very brief way, quite frankly, having dealt with criminals for the last 38, 40 years, wealth, power, they're driven by making money out of the vulnerable people because it's easy money to get. They are professionals. They are very skilled at what they do and the schemes in which they impart into us. They're very skilled at undertaking money laundering schemes whereby they will make the money that they obtain from these crimes appear legitimate. And they come up with all these, with lots of different schemes. They have lots of people working for them, but it's all about obtaining wealth and also power, because with wealth comes power. Also, in the hospital scenario that we explored earlier, it seems to me that a lot of these criminals also feed off the chaos and the misery that they cause to many people. Not entirely sure what underpins that, but at the end of the day, they are very, very serious crimes and need to be looked at, and we all need to be very, very aware and more vigilant, both within our everyday lives, being at home at the moment. More often, it could still happen to any of us. Back to you, Rick.
Okay, Tim. Again, conscious of time and the slot that we've got, there's a couple of questions left, but who are these criminals and who are they targeting?
Okay, well, within the UK, the National Crime Agency published a UK threat assessment a few weeks ago, and they've identified that there's 4,772 organised crime groups just within the UK. Each one of these, whether they're all undertaking similar types of crime, each one of these has the potential to make money out of the COVID-19 crisis. That's just in the UK. So obviously, if you think about an international scenario, there's a lot. However, individual criminals do operate these types of frauds as well. Just a couple of examples. Again, from the National Crime Agency, a couple of weeks ago, a 46-year-old pharmacist from Croydon was arrested under the Fraud Act after he allegedly made false and misleading claims about supplying tests for COVID-19. They raided his property and ended up with £20,000 in cash, which allegedly came from the perpetration of these crimes. And then the following day, a surveyor was arrested from Uxbridge near London in possession of 250 alleged testing kits that he planned to sell to construction workers that he was in contact with. Again, he was held on suspicion of making false and misleading claims. So you can see from that individuals are being active in the criminal environment as well. Back to you, Rick.
Well, really, just to finish off with, what can we do? And perhaps you'd just like to run us through some ideas.
Yes. We've got to remember that these criminals are professionals. This is their work, and in the main, they're very good at what they do. They're convincing in what they're trying to portray, whether it be free entries to a prize draw or advertising miracle cures for the coronavirus. And they do make individuals and companies, and indeed on occasions government, part with many millions of pounds. Since the start of the COVID-19 virus, the National Cybersecurity Centre has closed more than 2,000 online shops up until the end of March. And these are online shops, a lot of which have links. I think over 450 of them have links directly to the COVID-19 crisis. So you can see how active these criminals are in relation to this. I'm grateful to Northamptonshire Police and Action Fraud, who put together a very quick summary. I'm not going to read it out due to the time that we've got, bearing in mind also that these slides are available for you to look at afterwards. Keep yourself secure online. When you're using your computer, make sure that you've got the latest software, applications and operating systems, whether that be on your phone, on your tablet or on your laptop, and make sure that these are updated regularly. When Windows, which is a pain in the neck I know, tells you it's going to update something, allow it to do it, because the reason it's doing it is to safeguard your data. Very quickly, some advice from Europol. If you think you've been the victim of a ransomware attack, do not pay any funds into the link that would be given on the fake email, and go into a website which is www.nomoreransom.org. That will give you advice on how to deal with that particular type of fraud. And finally, in summary, again, I've just put together a very quick slide. Again, I'm not going to go through it all, because the bottom line is, be cautious and be vigilant about any dealings that you have. Be cautious and vigilant about phone calls that you're not expecting, about emails that you're not expecting, or text messages that you're not expecting. If there is something that seems too good to be true, then it probably is. And one more thing today is that the National Cyber Security Centre have just opened a new website which you can download a link to or get onto via Action Fraud, via the government website, about reporting fake and malicious emails. So by all means, get onto that if you think you've been a victim of one of these crimes. Okay. Shall I deal with the question now, Damien, or?
Yeah, now's a good opportunity, I think. Tim, we had a question come through prior to starting the webinar, so Tim will address that now. Thanks for your question, Mark.
Okay, yes. Mark Heffer has sent a question in before the webinar. It says current research by Crow UK and the Centre for Counter Fraud Studies shows that GDP is predicted to drop by 15% in quarter 2 of 2020, and that there is likely to be an increase of over 60% in the extent of UK fraud. At any time, there's a dishonest minority which is likely to become active rather than passive. Economic pressures may also cause people to reevaluate loyalties and rationalise dishonest behaviour that at other times they would not consider appropriate. Business will not be immune to these changes. How can organisations prepare and deal with the change in attitudes and culture that may follow the current crisis and fuel the rise in fraud? Really, really good question, because quite honestly, at the moment, until we get to that situation, nobody really knows. Having said that, I think it would be a really good time, once we get back to whatever normal is going to be, that as organisations and business, we look at our IT systems, in fact, not just our IT systems, any systems that we've got in place, and any procedures. Do we need to update the security within those procedures? Do we need to update our policies so that all of our staff, including ourselves, are clear, absolutely clear as to what they can and can't do and what they should and shouldn't be doing, and how to report any particular incidents? It's time basically that we shake up our own organisations. Maybe be more open, if you weren't before, in communications with all staff. Let them be aware that you are aware, i.e. trust in each other. This is a time when we're all working remotely. We in Agencia had a tea party the other week, which enabled us to all get together and talk to each other. Open communication is a really good tool for evaluating and valuing our customers and empathising with their situations. And besides making sure that your policies and procedures are up together and up to date, perhaps make it clear to your employees exactly what position you're in and the trust that you're putting in them. Until we get to that situation, there may be other stuff that we can do as well, but that's my opinion. I don't know about you, Rick, whether you've got any ideas.
No, I think you're absolutely right. It's an opportunity now to check. We're conscious of the fact that there's a rising opportunity for criminals and criminality during this period, while we're focusing on people's livelihoods and people's lives. So let's be mindful of that, and let's check our systems, let's check our procedures, make sure we're up to date with the latest virus protection systems within our computers, as well as, of course, within ourselves as well.
be aware of it at home, because nowadays we're working more and more at home anyway, outside of the crisis as well. So it's true for even when we come out of this particular crisis. Okay, Damien.
No, that's great. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Richard. Lots of really valuable information there. We've taken up our allocation of 30 minutes. However, we are available and will be hanging around for 5 or 10 minutes if anybody does have any questions. I'll draw your attention to the Q&A facility again at the bottom of the screen if you hover your mouse over the Zoom application. So if you do have any questions, do let us know there. If not, thank you very much for attending. And if you want to review this webinar, it will be available on the Agencia website and shared via social media as well. Likewise, the slides. You can also see Tim and Richard's contact details on your screen now. If you have any follow-up questions or you feel you need their support or Agencia's expert support, they're the contact details to use. So we'll hang around for another sort of 4 or 5 minutes unless we get a run on questions, and so do fire away. Thank you.
Just to add to that, very happy to deal with any questions by email or whatever, as long as they don't contain any strange links.
Sam, I noticed you've got your hand up in the facility. I'm just going to try and allow you to talk. Sam, are you able to talk? No, it might be that you perhaps don't have your microphone on. If you do have a question, Sam, do feel free to note it in the Q&A section. If not, you can always follow up with Tim and Richard separately. Thank you. As mentioned, we'll be on for another 2 or 3 minutes. So if you do have any questions, do feel free to fire away.
Just for Sam's notice, Sam, you're trying to get through, your microphone switched off.
Thanks, Rick. Sam's he's noted his question down now. Tim or Richard, I'm not sure who would be better suited for this. How many of these cases are being processed for prosecutions? Are we scratching the surface on this?
Well, obviously, in the time given, can you hear me all right, Damien? Is it?
I can hear you okay. Yeah, you're fine, Tim.
The examples that I've taken are cases that have been publicised or I've been made aware of, where there have been arrests made. I mentioned that that there was over 2,000 online shops. I just want to make sure that I've got the right figures here. 2,000 online shops that were taken down by the National Cyber Security Centre, which operates out of GCHQ. So these are shops that have been brought to their attention that are offering for sale illegal goods for supply or illegal services. So that they are shops and centres that have actually been prosecuted, if you like, or taken out of action. And as I said, over 450 of those are directly linked to COVID-19. So because those figures have been released, a lot of those will have been dealt with by law enforcement. The ones that I've quoted to you have been dealt with by law enforcement, and now I have others here which are being. But what we must bear in mind is that due to restrictions on resources and staffing levels, it may be that the police, it may be that the intelligence services, the terrorist units and what have you, that are looking at these types of crime may not be staffed as much as they would like. Having said that, I have no doubt that they will give them their attention as and when they can, even when it follows the crisis.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, gentlemen. That's very helpful, very useful.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you very much.
Well done for getting your microphone working as well. That's great. That's great, Tim. I've got another question from Barry as well. It regards Zoom, and obviously the media reported that Zoom wasn't safe, and has this now been fixed to make it more secure? Not sure if that's your area of expertise, Rick or Tim.
Happy to answer that one though.
Go on, Rick, you go.
Having also been very conscious of the evolution of this rumor and where it came from. Any system that you use over the internet has its own security issues. It's not just Zoom. Beware of any internet facility. But what we're doing with Agencia, which does help to reduce that possibility, is we have set up like a waiting room. So you are given a link, you sit in a waiting room and are then connected to the webinar. So in that sense, it makes it very difficult for somebody who wants to, what they call Zoom bomb us with noises or photographs. So it reduces the risk. But as I've said, there are very few systems that are entirely secure, very few indeed.
Just in addition to that, Rick, and 100% agree with what there was a lot of publicity regarding the use of Zoom. In a general sense, any of these platforms, my own personal experiences, I would advise that any security measures that you are advised to take in relation to setting up these types of platform, whether it be internally or for even speaking with friends and family, make sure that you take advantage of the security methods that are recommended to you by the people that use these platforms, such as Microsoft or whatever, because they are there to help keep those particular systems safe. And I know they've done a lot of work on Zoom to try and make it safe, because there were some pretty horrendous instances that were given out, which we won't go into now, but pretty horrendous instances that were given out. It's certainly better than it was, and has to be really, because of the amount it's being used at the moment.
Thanks both. And one final Zoom specific point from me. There is the facility to make all webinars or meetings password protected. We don't do it in these instances because these webinars are going to be broadcast to the general public, but that's another layer of security that you can use as well. Any more questions from anybody? Still a couple of people logged on still. We'll say another couple of minutes, but if you do, feel free to log out if you have all the information you need. Feel free to ask any more questions if you've got anything else, but we will be sharing the webinar. We will be sharing the slides afterwards as well. Yeah, I'll be available for a couple more minutes as well if you do have any further questions.
I can see people logging
Hi,
off
Damien.
now.
Yeah, Damien, can you hear me?
I can, yeah. Is that Sam? Yeah.
Yes. Listen, can I thank you, gentlemen? I promise you, this is my first webinar ever, and so I feel very proud of myself.
Well done.
And yeah, no, that's fantastic. Thanks very much.
You're very welcome. Very welcome. Hope it was useful for you, Sam.
Thank you.
It's worth pointing out that we've got a selection of the webinars that we've been doing over the last 3 or 4 weeks that are available on the website. Sure. Similarly, we'll be running a couple more over the course of the next month or so. So do keep an eye out on the marketing and on the promotions that we are publishing, and you're more than welcome to attend future webinars. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, I think we'll end it there. If everybody's happy, there's no more questions coming in. Thank you again for everybody who's logged in and is still logged in, and look out for the next webinar. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, gents. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Bye.
Bye.
Well done.
Is everybody off?